Okay, it looks like our live streaming is now live. Hello, everybody. Happy Earth Day. I'm so grateful to be here. My name is Dr. Loraine Lundquist. When you said we should introduce ourselves, I put in a slide to introduce myself, so I'll pull up my slides here. Um, give me a moment. Um, So, my name is Dr. Loraine Lundquist. I am a faculty associate at the Institute for Sustainability at Cal State University Northridge. And I guess this slide is out of date because I'm also the director of our new master's program in sustainability, which just started this year. We have our very first cohort of students this year, which is a fantastic group of folks. And we are working to grow our program as well. So if you know people that might be interested, please send them our way. My background's in physics and science, and I shifted over to working on sustainability after I became a mom and ended up getting really frightened about climate change and changing my career. I also am involved in politics. You all supported me when I ran for LA City Council in 2020, but didn't quite make it. But I'm still involved in lots of climate activism, especially, and many political things in general. So today I'll be speaking about getting off of gas in the shadow of Aliso Canyon. For anyone who doesn't know, the Aliso Canyon blowout was considered the largest climate disaster in US history. It happened in the hills north in the most northern part of Los Angeles, near Porter Ranch, Northridge, Granada Hills area. Gosh, I think it was in 2015. And about 8,000 households were displaced for about 7 months, while this massive well filled with natural gas was just venting out enormous amounts of methane into the atmosphere. So I'm here to give you an update about what's going on with Aliso Canyon. The facility was never shut down. There was a big community groundswell to shut the facility down. It was temporarily shut down while they were doing repairs. But then they decided to repressurize the storage facility. Actually, there's a big update that just happened this week. SoCal Gas applied to the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, to try to increase the gas storage levels at Aliso. They have been operating, but they've been operating at a reduced storage capacity and under rules that say they can only use it under certain emergency circumstances. But SoCal Gas, citing high winter gas prices, I think many of you probably noticed if you have SoCal Gas that the huge upswing in gas prices over the winter. And so they're saying they need to use Aliso in order to cut prices. But you might, if you know anything about SoCal Gas, or if you have the experience that my community has had with SoCal Gas, you might question what's behind both the increase in gas prices as well as the this claim that they need to use Aliso in order to cut prices, and also the claim that we might see better prices if we did use Aliso. So that we are not alone in questioning that. In fact, Consumer Watchdog in January called for investigations into SoCal Gas over the natural price spikes. They called on Attorney General Bonta and LA City Attorney Heidi Feldstein Soto to investigate SoCal Gas for the huge price spikes, saying that they are accusing them or questioning whether they might have purposefully reduced their winter storage numbers in order to jack up prices. So these are some quotes from the letter that Consumer Watchdog sent to our attorneys in the state and the city, asking, first of all, pointing out that Sempra made huge profits from the spike in gas prices. They actually, SoCal Gas had to buy from Sempra due to shortages, and Sempra is the parent company for SoCal Gas. So they're asking the question, how much did Sempra profit from selling gas to SoCal Gas at increased costs, which is exactly what happened. It seems like they're doing some kind of strange money shuffling. It's definitely sort of raises red flags. They're also asking, did Sempra deplete their inventories in order to purposely drive up price on the West Coast? They noted that prices on the West Coast were high, but not on the East Coast. Knowing that it had a guaranteed market for higher priced gas from subsidiary utilities. And then the final quote, evidence shows that SoCal Gas did not adequately purchase gas for the 2022-2023 season. Ordinarily, the utility would purchase, transport, and store ahead of the season to plan for winter surges. This failure of planning created conditions where it had to buy from its parent company, Sempra's subsidiaries, on the smart market at twice the normal price, passing on the cost to its consumers. If you are interested in having our city attorney, for example, investigate this question, I highly recommend that you send her a letter or send a letter to Attorney General Rob Bonta, because they have not, to my knowledge, opened investigations into this question. And I should just mention, I think I was only asked to talk for about 10 minutes, but I did just want to touch a little bit on, the context in which all of this is happening, in which there are both new findings about the health consequences of using gas within our homes. And in addition to that, there's incredible new funding available for getting off of gas coming from the Federal Inflation Reduction Act. So I just want to touch on both of those things just briefly. There have been a whole bunch of pretty recent findings with respect to the health of gas appliances and gas stoves in particular. I'll just highlight this one that I found particularly striking, that's really quite recent. It was published in December of 2022 in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. And they were trying to look at childhood asthma in the United States and ask this question: how much childhood asthma can be attributed directly to gas stoves, specifically gas stoves? And they found 12% in the country as a whole, and specifically in California, 20% of all childhood asthma cases can be attributed to gas stoves. And gas stoves out of homes in California, we have 20% less childhood asthma cases, which I think is a really striking finding. And while I knew there were many health consequences of gas stoves, I did not know that it was that much of a contributor to childhood asthma. And this is, of course, on top of other health findings, looking at more toxic contaminants that are in the gas, things like benzene and other toxins. So we're just learning more and more about the problems of using gas in our homes and the problems for indoor air pollution. But the good news is there's huge incentives coming from the Inflation Reduction Act to help us try to get off of gas stoves. And I'd like to use this Washington Post article here. Open this up because it has a nice little, I'll put the link in the chat, but it's got a great little interactive graphic to help you understand what kind of incentives are available if you personally have the ability to change out your own personal appliances, which for the most part is people who own their home, but there are also some incentives available for renters as well, depending on the circumstances of your home. But Heat pump electric heaters are very efficient, energy efficient alternatives to furnaces. They actually replace both your furnace and your air conditioner. So they do both heating and cooling. They're completely electric, as you can see, much smaller than either, your typical air conditioner. And basically save a lot of money. And so there's a credit of as much as $2,000 to help owners purchase heat pumps, which some of them are cost less than $2,000, but they vary very much in price range. There are, if you're interested in getting rid of your gas stove, you can replace it with an induction stove. You don't have to use sort of those old school electric stoves, which are not as much fun to cook on. But induction stoves are quickly becoming the industry standard, in chef competitions and in fine dining. Chefs really prefer the induction stoves because they are so precise in how much you're able to control the heating. And they're also, if you turn up the heat to high, you can really heat things much faster than you can on a gas stove. I found my induction stove can boil water sometimes about twice as fast as my gas stove did. There are electric vehicle incentives as well, solar panels, home battery incentives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Radiant heating, electric water heaters. Want to point that out because unlike some of the other appliances, electric water heaters can really be a good deal, and you can really get an incentive that fully pairs for the electric water heater. But I highly recommend doing it before your gas water heater breaks because there is a little bit of a backup. A lot of people are getting these new electric heat pump water heaters or other types of electric water heaters, and so there's a little bit of a supply chain backup. So I'll put the link for this article into the chat, and I'll pause here for any questions. Cliff.
Yeah, hi. So we have to we actually have no working air conditioner, and we signed a contract with a guy last May. We still haven't got the air conditioner to put in a heat pump because we were eligible. We got in on the last day of one $3,000 rebate because it's like a $16,000, $15,000 system that we can't afford. And then there's another, the LADWP, I guess, was offering a $3,000 rebate. But the company then had to take had to send their technician to take a class, which he failed twice and finally passed. So they're ready to put the thing in. But then the Inflation Reduction Act apparently is offering like a much larger rebate. But when I call my useless Congressman Tony Cardenas, who is just only good if you're a corporation who gives him money, nobody there seems to know how we could qualify for that rebate. And I'm wondering if you have any insight into that, because if we can get a bunch of rebates together, we might not have to do the heat wave this next summer without any air conditioning, which was only made tolerable by the fact we have a very shady pecan tree that keeps our house shady here in the valley. So.
Yeah, great questions. We can definitely try to connect offline about the specifics, but I will direct you to this website called The Switch Is On, which helps. So you mentioned that problem with your contractor not being able to install it. This is a big problem with a lot of the electric appliances. We switched out our water heater, and we had the same problem where we were calling people to install it, and they were, contractors who would usually install a water heater were saying didn't have any idea what the electric one was, and we're saying, why would you want to do that? No reason to do that, and trying to talk us out of it because they really just don't know. They really don't know how to install them, and so this website can help direct you to. Well, first of all, it's a general. A website with tips for how to electrify and how to find some of those incentives that you're talking about, but also for finding a contractor who is, pre-approved to do the electric appliances, which can help as well. And as far as the Inflation Reduction Act goes, well, there are these incentives available, written into the act. I'm not sure if the money is moving yet, honestly. So I have to check into the exact current situation about whether those rebates are immediately available at this moment.
Thank you, Loraine. Keep me posted. If you find out anything, let me know, because we really want to try to do this sooner rather than later.
Right, yes, if I'm sure
Now's a
you
good
have
time
an
to do it.
immediate need.
Dory,
Yeah.
go ahead, please.
Sure.
My question, Loraine, is like, I'm just curious on the heat pump. Is there anything of like where they have to change your regular air conditioner heater vents or something, or it's just using them?
You can use your current venting. Yeah, you don't have to change your vents, but you might or might not, depending on the electrical system in your house. It's possible that there will be electrical upgrades required. I guess that's true for any, installing any new electric appliance. So, a circuit might need to be upgraded, or in some cases, the whole panel is not sufficient to, install, whether it's, like an electric car charger or whatever it might be. There are cases in which you need a panel upgrade. So,
I think I got something, a panel upgrade from when I got solar, but I don't know if it's additionally that I have to get a different upgrade or.
oh, if it's already been upgraded, I bet you wouldn't need another one. But Cliff is saying they were told that they did need larger vents, but this is a good thing. We'll have a warmer house in the winter. Khin.
Loraine, have any of your electeds been helpful in closing down Aliso Canyon? And if they have, who are they? And if they haven't, why do you think they're not being all that helpful?
Well, no one's been successful, obviously, but Henry Stern's been helpful. Definitely Pilar Schiavo, who's a recently elected assembly member in the region, is also very helpful, and Christy Smith before her was very helpful when she was an assembly member in the area. Caroline Menjivar is also state senator, has also been newly elected and is also interested in shutting Aliso Canyon down. So I think with some of that partnership, in fact, with this new development with the CPUC, we're looking at trying to create a joint letter with some of those electeds to push back on this request from the CPUC to expand the use of Aliso Canyon.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions, anybody? No. Are we ready to go on to Marcia Hanscom, who's the next speaker? Thanks again, Loraine, appreciate your talk.
Yeah, thank you.
Marcia, are you ready?
Okay, I think I'm ready, but let me see how hold on. Okay, so my name's Marcia Hanscom. I'm a member of the board of Americans for Democratic Action, SoCal, and I'm also an activist for protecting our public lands, and have become a climate activist when I didn't know I need to be, but it turns out it's all very connected. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about things that are on our Los Angeles coast. We have a greenhouse gas presence that continues, including lots of toxic chemicals. We have explosion possibilities, NOx pollution that SoCal Gas is calling green hydrogen. We have bulldozers ready to come into the Ballona wetlands. And here's the good question. Will the National Park Service offer a better future for our coast? Because as you can see here, and it's not going forward. Not sure why it's not going forward. Okay, here we go. So our LA coast is filled with beauty and nature, even though, as you can see by this overhead Google map, it's very industrialized and filled with lots and lots of high density residential area. We have the Chevron refinery on our coast. We have the Hyperion wastewater treatment plant that takes up much of the wastewater from a huge amount of Los Angeles, and 2 electrical methane gas powered generating plants, as well as underground methane gas storage. Excuse me. We also have a lot of beauty and nature, like Sentinel Slough here at the Ballona Wetlands, great blue heron, many different species, more than 1,700 species of native plants and animals are in the Ballona Wetlands alone. 2 monarch butterfly groves, one in Manhattan Beach, one in Los Angeles. We have the endangered El Segundo blue butterfly. We have a number of endangered species, actually, including the state endangered Belding savanna sparrow. But at the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve, it is actually threatened with a destructive bulldozing plan. And you can see that, really, does that make sense is the question. Well, it doesn't make sense, but here's why it is threatening the wetlands. We've held it off for 10 years, but we found out in the meantime that the main reason this destructive plan is there is because of SoCal Gas. This is the tank farm and on the bottom part of this photograph that is just a small part of everything that is related to the SoCal gas storage facility that's very similar to the one at Aliso Canyon. It's a little bit older, which makes us even more worried, since it was some corroded pipes and valves that apparently caused that one. We're very worried that we could have a similar kind of explosion here. And what happens is the methane gas is transported to LA by pipeline after being fracked in other states like Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Utah. And it's stored under high pressure about a mile below the surface of the land, beneath the Ballona Wetlands, beneath Marina del Rey, beneath a number of residential areas. And blowouts have happened in Playa del Rey. Not as big as the Aliso Canyon one, but it could happen here as well. In 2019, there was a blowout in Marina del Rey, and you can see this worker trying to escape from the scaffolding here. They were trying to close an old oil well that is in this same oil field because they were building a hotel, and it took them 6 months to even cap this well properly. There are oil and gas wells, some that are capped, some that are not, throughout the marina, throughout the coastal area of Playa del Rey. And then there are some that are actually working wells. So if we were to have the same kind of blowout as they had at least at Aliso Canyon, if a 5-mile radius for evacuation happened like they had to have there, it would include Santa Monica, Culver City, and LAX, which is why Culver City, Santa Monica, the city of LA, the county of LA have all passed resolutions and sent information to the governor pleading with him to close this facility. You can see how close some of these homes are to some of the wells. And what's important to know is that while SoCal Gas likes to say everything's safe, everything's fine, we really started taking notice when the LA firefighters sued SoCal Gas, alleging toxic chemicals from the Aliso Canyon gas leak made them sick. Now, firefighters are not weak people. They're usually very strong, very together, and nearly 30 firefighters said they responded unprotected without proper protective gear because they were told by SoCal Gas, everything is fine. Don't worry, this is not unsafe. So so on the heels of all of this, where we thought we were going to be able to get enough consensus to close down the Playa del Rey gas facility, along comes SoCal Gas with their PR program for a green hydrogen program. And they're calling it green hydrogen. They've told LADWP, look, we can do this, we can start using the electrical generating facilities. Instead of using methane gas, we'll use green hydrogen. Well, it turns out that they actually are going to use 30% hydrogen and the rest of it methane. So and then there are other issues, like it's very water intensive, and the question is, where will the water come from? There's significant NOx pollution, and you can see by this graphic from an article a couple of years ago that shows already with LAX, there's huge amount of respiratory illness and pollution coming off of the LAX facility. The prevailing winds go eastward, so you can see how it gets dark, right, off of the ocean there. And so do we want to add more NOx pollution? Because the facility where they want to put this hydrogen is called Scattergood. And so that's the question is, do we want to continue with an industrialized coast or have a National Park Service presence? And this is the positive vision that we're working toward. U.S. Representative Ted Lieu worked for more than 6 years to get a bill passed in Congress, and it finally did pass this last December as part of the omnibus bill, and President Biden signed it right before the beginning of the year. And you can see why would the National Park Service be interested? Because we do have all of this beauty along our coast. The National Park Service would come in, and from Venice to San Pedro, going up Ballona Creek to the Baldwin Hills, they would be doing a survey and study, a 3-year study recommending a course of action to Congress of what could we have here. Could we have a national recreation area like they have in the Santa Monica Mountains and the Golden Gate area? Or could we have maybe a national monument or two? So they would look at the natural resources, the cultural resources, and the historical resources. You probably know they love lighthouses at the National Park Service, and we've got several on our coast here. We have lots of very interesting cultural issues that could be interpreted well by the National Park Service. And of course, we have lots of natural resources. So we know that their study area will include the Ballona Wetlands, it will include the Baldwin Hills, the South Bay beaches, all the way down to San Pedro. And it might include, if the public wants and says loud enough, it might include Catalina Island and Palos Verdes Peninsula and even Long Beach. So, we're working to stop the immediate threats, the bulldozing of Ballona. And you can go to defendballonawetlands.org to find out more about that. And also, we are wanting to stop the methane gas, chemicals, and explosions possibilities at the Playa del Rey facility, which is enmeshed with the Ballona wetlands. And we want to stop this dangerous hydrogen methane scheme. And there's a website called SoCalGasMakesMeSick.com where you can find out more information about that. And our positive vision solution is Los Angeles Coast Forever. So you can sign up for notifications of public hearings that are going to start happening. The National Park Service is scheduled to start sending their experts out to us beginning of next year. You can send an email message to losangelescoastforever@gmail.com and include your name, email, address, and phone number. Tell every elected official you know that you welcome the presence of the National Park Service here on the LA coast. And you can join Los Angeles Coast Forever on Facebook. Thanks to Jonathan Coffin and Diane Gowder for their beautiful photos. And we hope you will join us in this positive vision. Any questions? Nancy.
The pictures, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Marcia. Beautiful presentation. Love the pictures. Very, very lovely. When I moved to LA 30 some years ago, I was told that all of the California coast was public land, that there's some kind of law that there's not, people can't have private buildings on the coast. How does this industrialization get away with coming up to the coast?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, the Coastal Act and the California Constitution have some provisions that relate to what you're saying. But when they talk about that it's public, it's at the mean high tide line. And there are states that actually allow building into the ocean, over the ocean. So that's the difference. Like the mean high tide line is where public land starts. So you'll see, even like if you drive up near Malibu, you'll see houses pretty close to the water, but they can't go over the mean high tide line. So, that's that. So if you get a little bit further in, like where all of this industrialization is, some of that is in the coastal zone. Some of it was actually not drawn into the coastal zone when the 1972 Coastal Act was voted into being by the voting public. So, and there are a bunch of exemptions in the Coastal Act, particularly for utility plants. So you'll see up in Oxnard, there are electrical generating plants right there on the sandy beach. At least ours are a little bit inland, not on the beach. I mean, one of the electrical generating plants, not owned by LIDWP, so not the one we're just talking about, the Scattergood one, but there is another one near Chevron, and that one is on the beach in El Segundo. So, it's unfortunate that there were these exemptions made in the Coastal Act. And, so that's why it's so great that there is such a thing as the National Park Organic Act, and there is a possibility through direction from Congress to do something else. And that's what we're looking at here.
Thank you for your work. That's really great.
Sure. Let's see. I see a hand raised by Wendy.
Hi, thank you. I'm really enjoying all the presentations. This is fantastic. You mentioned something in your constitution about protections. And I was actually just thinking about that. I'm wondering if there have been any ballot initiatives that target the Bill of Rights section of the Constitution. There's a book out called Green Amendments by Maya Van Rossum. There's a couple of states, there's Pennsylvania, Montana, and New York, and in Florida, we're working on the right to clean water. And if you put it depends upon what section of the Constitution it's in, but in places that this has been enacted, like in Pennsylvania, and really recently in New York, there have been certain permits that have been stopped in their tracks because they would inherently violate this fundamental right to whatever is declared by that state, whether it's clean air, clean environment, clean water. So it might be something to consider or if anybody has considered pursuing something that would supersede any of the legislature, any of these corporate takeovers. Thanks so much for this.
Sure. Well, so the constitutional provision I was speaking of relates to the question Nancy had about, isn't there something in California that says you can't really build in along the coast? And what that is a that's in the California Constitution, and that specifically relates to the mean high tide line. And the State Lands Commission does a lot of enforcement to make sure nobody's building into the mean high tide line, meaning when the water's coming up over the sand, there's a certain area that you cannot build in, which is different than like if you go to New Jersey, you'll see places that are built right into the water, into the tidelands. So that is a big plus. But then we did have an initiative in 1972 that was my first election I got to vote in. I just turned 18 and got to vote then. And it was for the California Coastal Act. And it was a really great visionary document. Unfortunately, even though it passed with flying colors. A few years later, whenever you have an initiative, you also have to then have the legislator do some things to enact that legislation. So for 4 years, there was a lot of fighting in Sacramento and a lot of lobbyists up there. And so what we ended up with the Coastal Act was a very kind of a mishmash. And so it's still one of the most important coastal laws in the whole country and even the world. But it takes citizen action and citizen watchdogging and being involved in order to make sure that it does the kind of protection we want. So that's kind of the whole thing about Americans for Democratic Action. We've got to be in action all the time. Did you have a question, Khin? Or Paul?
I did. Basically, since you have a new supervisor and that we helped elect Holly Mitchell to be our supervisor with the help of Sierra Club, so that she would pass a ban on fracking and drilling in the Inglewood oil fields, and that she did. So I was wondering, have you connected with her so that she could help you with the Aliso Canyon project?
You mean with the Playa del Rey gas storage?
I'm sorry, Playa.
Yeah. So
yeah,
here's the thing, because that passed in Culver City, and the city of LA has now passed a ban on new oil drilling and gas drilling. It passed this last December. And we have some questions because SoCal Gas just submitted an application to the Coastal Commission for putting some new wells here. And we don't think they're allowed because it's in the city of LA and there is supposed to be a ban on that. And so we're going to be talking with our city attorney because I think someone in the city planning department mistakenly gave them a permit as well. So we're not sure, we're going to have to look at the actual language, but it was supposed to go into effect this last January. So for new wells, so we'll see. But yes, Holly Mitchell just became our new county supervisor because they actually changed the districts. We had Janice Hahn and Holly Mitchell was a little bit upstream in the creek, but now we've got Holly Mitchell for this entire area. She's very excited about the National Park Service idea. So we're very much looking forward to working with her on that. And Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah, I missed part of what, I came in late, I apologize, but I had a question. For many years when I'd go surfing, we used to go through some places where we would walk along the mean high tide and the sheriffs would come and arrest us and throw us out. And they wouldn't throw us in jail, but they would harass us and basically tell us we had to leave. And it just amazes me that they were able to get away with that.
I was about 20 years ago, I joined the board of an organization called Access for All. It's not in existence anymore, but we did a lot of work on that very issue. And we got David Geffen, for instance, in Malibu to open up the gate by his house where he was not supposed to have a locked gate, so people could go to the water's edge and walk. So there's been a lot of education about that over the last 20 years, and you're totally right. There are people who thought they bought a home. Excuse me.
Even at the Hollister
People who
Ranch,
thought they bought a home close that was, their private beach. It wasn't true. That water line belongs to everybody.
yeah, the Hollister Ranch used to even, there were guys that used to take pot shots at us and we had to come in on boat. But there were areas where you can go by the beach as long as you're on the mean high tide line. And still we get harassed. It was just unbelievable.
There are a lot of people who don't really know the rules. And in fact, Hollister Ranch is still being fought out in the courts. So it's constant pressure endlessly applied. That's what I was taught when I first became an activist. Constant pressure endlessly applied. And I think someone's going to have a presentation now to talk more about that.
I hate to cut you off, Marcia, but we're going over time and I need to get in here. I'm Nancy Niparko. And before I really start, I want to point out that my sister Barb is listening to us from Alaska at the foot of Denali Mountain. And my very good friends, Jane and Terry, are in on the call from Ontario, Canada. So thank you everyone for being here. And I'm a pediatric neurologist. I care about the future for all our kids. And I know very little about plastics, except I think like everybody, I think it's the most important issue in our world. And here we go. When I was a kid, this is what trash was. I think even at the corner of my blue collar town I grew up in, it was tires, piled up tires, and that's what you found in junkyards. Well, today's garbage is this. It's our plastic bottles. It's filling our oceans. It's filling all our recycle centers. It's overfilling the garbage cans, including plastic utensils, bottle caps, plastic bracelets, plastic straws. This is today's trash. And it's floating out into our oceans. And if you haven't heard about the Great Garbage Patch, it's in our Pacific Ocean, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It has, can you read that? Oh, okay. Is it 1.6 billion pieces of garbage? Lots of garbage. And if you put it on top of the United States, it would stretch from North Dakota to Texas. That's how big it is. In fact, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is only a 5-day boat ride from the California coast, and it spans 610 square miles. All plastic bottles, plastic refuge, and yes, there's some holes in it somewhere, so you can't really walk on it. In fact, there's more than the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. There's one in the North Atlantic, there's one in the South Atlantic, there's one in the ocean, in Indian Ocean, and the South Pacific. And here's some pictures of them. In fact, some of them do pile high, so they actually become an island in the ocean. And it's all plastic refuge. Here's the Caribbean Sea, or the Caribbean, whatever you fancy. In fact, our marine land gets caught in this. And it's really sad to see our marine life tangled up in this refuge and sometimes suffocated to death. And here's a dead marine life with their stomach full of plastic and garbage from the sea in the Indian Ocean. And if you want to be positive, there are scientists who are all excited because they found new life in our plastic oceans, our plastic refuge conglomerations. And if you get excited about it, it's costopodid hybrid Agallophenia, and gooseneck barnacles. So if gooseneck barnacles is the future of the world that you look forward to, plastics are helping. This is a shot from space, picking up the garbage in our oceans. What happens to these plastics? In fact, they become microplastics as they break down, and then they become nanoplastics when they become very small. The plastic bottles, packaging, fishnets, car tires fragment due to the photo deregulation, erosion by the wave action, erosion by the sand, and contact with the animals. Where do they go when they become micro and nanoplastics? Well, a lot of work has been done on zebrafish, who most significantly, it's found to disrupt their gene regulation. And plastic pieces are found in human placentas. And the study showed that the feces of infants have more microplastics than adults and more than meconium. Meconium's the poop that comes out of babies when they're first born. And some people think it has to do, or it contributes to, inflammatory bowel disease, which I think is one of those very popular diagnoses these days, with lots of people having stomach and abdominal problems. So what can we project is going to be the human impact of microplastics? Well, so far, most research is only done in fish and mice, but it's pretty clear that it causes changes in gene expression. It causes particle accumulations in gills, intestine, liver, kidney, gallbladder, gonads, which is where our future is. Inflammation of these different parts of the body, the liver, the kidney, the muscles, lipid oxidative damage in organs, disturbed metabolism, which is a general statement. In the fish and mice, it causes changes in motility and behavior. Some people say autism, which I don't really buy myself, but alterations in intestinal barrier, which is the way we absorb nutrients. And the gut microbiome, which we're all looking into our diets about, this is really looking like a significant issue. And overall, these animals are less fit and die earlier. And here's a very complicated, great map, which you could study for a long time, but this is the greatest part. A cardboard box thrown out takes about 2 months to decompose. A cigarette butt, 5 years. One of our plastic grocery bags, 10 to 20 years. A styrofoam cup, 50 years. Every styrofoam cup is going to be on this earth longer than most people on this call. Tin cans, aluminum cans, 6-pack rings, those little plastic things that hold together 6 cans of soda or beer. They're going to be on this earth for 400 years. One of our plastic bottles that we drink water out of is going to be on this earth for 450 years. And we don't know about glass bottles. Do you know how long a banana peel is on this earth? Anyone want to guess? 5 days. Natural containers for our food biodegrade pretty quick. So what can we do? We can carry reusable water bottles and refill them. We can save money that way. We can put our plastics and other things in the recycling bin, but I think we need to support our recycling centers because they seem to be inefficient and closing down, at least around California. Say no to plastic plates, cutlery, straws, and stir sticks. Carry your own. Ask for paper plates. Ditch the plastic wrap. Foil is recyclable, and so is the good old wax paper that our moms and dads use to wrap our peanut butter sandwiches. Use the free tea. You brew your coffee with filters. Chewing gum is plastic. Now this is for anyone with little kids, I guess. I don't know anyone who uses a lot of glitter, but balloons don't biodegrade. and choose to wrap your things in paper, not plastic, and take your own reusable bags. And this has been a hobby of mine the last few years. You can search online for these are some companies that will sell biodegradable stuff to you, but you can get laundry strips, which I've lived with for the last handful of years. Shampoo bars work great. And my friend Khin on this call will vow for that too. So if you're not yet persuaded to be a superhero for the world, saving the world, don't sell your brain. We all have to start somewhere. So we're worth more than 25 cents. I love this sign. I found it in Chicago once. And this is a cartoon produced by our own Cliff Tasner. And to make it look a little bit easier when it all feels overwhelming.
We are creatures of habits that are deeply ingrained, but some of these habits should not be maintained. We love the convenience, but we gotta discuss what it's doing to the planet, what it's doing to us.
It's a lot of resources, it's a high price to pay for a single-use item that we just threw away. We've created a problem that is hard to ignore. So maybe we should do some things the way we did before.
Let's get through the day the way we used to do. It's the time to move beyond our plastics craze.
We can heal ourselves and save the planet too. 'Cause certain things were better in the good old days. The way that we've been living, we just can't sustain. The reckoning has come, we gotta change our ways. But what we're giving up won't really cause much pain. 'Cause certain things were better in the good old days.
So this is my presentation. Please, if you want to, we appreciate any kind of donations to adasocal.org. And Khin is next, but I'll take any questions.
Can I? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure you can hear me. This is Harvey Wasserman.
Hi, Harvey. You're going to go after Khin.
Can I go now? I got people waiting for me.
It's okay by me if Harvey wants to go now. I have no problem with that.
Sorry to be rude, but I'm actually in Manhattan with with Marianne Williamson.
We
And,
know that. We heard about it. Yeah.
and I was just briefing her on nuclear power, and she's waiting for me to come back. I just told her the great news that that Germany has shut all its atomic reactors. People have been working on this for decades. It's living proof that activism makes a difference. Had it not been for the anti-nuclear movement in Germany, those reactors would still be operating. And I think we can take great pride. And of course, many of us are Californians, and we are being backstabbed by the governor who signed an agreement in 2016 to shut the 2 reactors at Diablo Canyon, where many of us, more than 10,000 of us, have been arrested. And Governor Newsom, shame on you. California should be a solartopia now. We have the capability of being 100% green energy in California. There are more than 70,000 people working in California in the solar industry alone. That doesn't count wind or efficiency or batteries. And Governor Newsom has stepped in and broken a good faith agreement to shut Diablo Canyon. So on Earth Day, we need to redouble our efforts or far more and get those 2 reactors shut. There is no greater danger to the state of California than the 2 reactors at Diablo Canyon. They are almost 40 years old. They are cracked, embrittled, falling apart, completely not cost effective. They're taking more than $1 billion in federal money and more than $1 billion from us ratepayers in California and to feed these 2 reactors to keep them going when they should never have been built. They're surrounded by earthquake faults. We need to get them shut. So on Earth Day, that's what we've got to do. But we do have to celebrate this fantastic victory. I have a piece out at progressive.org today about the contrast between Germany. We need to celebrate this victory of the last 3 of the 17 German nuclear power plants shutting down. They are completely replacing the power with wind and solar and batteries and efficiency. It's an incredible victory for the green movement and totally appropriate for Earth Day. So, everybody in California, we have got to get Gavin Newsom and get the state to restore sanity. We had a beautiful, really a groundbreaking decision. It worked out agreement where the Diablo would shut, and we were still are phasing in renewable energy. It was agreed to by the state legislature, by Governor Brown, by Lieutenant Governor Newsom, by the Public Utilities Commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the local governments, the unions, the environmental movement. Everybody came forward in 2016 and agreed to shut Diablo Canyon and to solarize the state. Everything was going just fine. And Newsom stepped in and is giving $2.5 billion in state and federal money to these 2 reactors, creating 0 jobs and just threatening our health and our safety. And the state has never shown us any kind of evacuation plan in case, God forbid, those reactors blow up and the radioactive cloud goes straight to LA. They are not insured. These 2 reactors have no substantial private insurance or even federal insurance. You can't drive a car, as you know, in California without insurance, but they're driving these 2 nuclear reactors. So on this Earth Day, yes.
Harvey, there are people who are not from California here. Please tell them about it sitting on an earthquake fault and how far it would affect people if the earthquake went off. And also tell them your background and all your qualifications.
Okay, well, I just got out of federal prison on, no, I'm sorry. The Diablo Canyon, unfortunately, sits directly upwind from the rest of the country, from the rest of the continent. If something happened at Diablo Canyon, like happened at Chernobyl, the radiation would go all the way across the country. Now, there are 92 actually, there are now 94 reactors in the United States. Their average age is 40 years. They are all falling apart. If they were cars, you wouldn't drive them. If they were a boat, you wouldn't get in them. We need to shut all these reactors, and we have the capability of doing it with solar, with wind, with tidal, geothermal, ocean thermal, batteries, increased efficiency. Completely unconscionable that any of these 90 plus reactors are still operating in the United States. My background about this is I actually did a report on nuclear power in 9th grade in 1959. So I know all about it. But then in 1973, I was living on an organic farm in Massachusetts, and the industry came in, said they were going to build 2 nuclear reactors 4 miles from our house. We said, no, you're not. We stopped them, and we coined the phrase no nukes. I have an archive at UMass that has the very first no nukes t-shirt in it. And we've been doing that. That's 50 years ago, right? And we've been doing it ever since. It's exactly 50 years. And we, at the time, Richard Nixon said there would be 1,000 nuclear reactors in the US by the year 2000. But in the year 2000, there were 104, and now we're down to 94. So we have stopped 900 reactors, but these last 94, we have got to get shut, starting with Diablo Canyon. So,
Anybody have questions for him?
yeah, ask him why I'm sitting in a car in Manhattan.
Go, Dory.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised you haven't spoken about the Santa Susana Field Lab site or Rocketdyne, because we've been trying to get it cleaned up a long time. And Committee to Bridge the Gap, Dan Hirsch, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Parents versus Rocketdyne, and we had agreements, legally binding contracts in 2010 and 2007 with Boeing, and 2010 with DOE and NASA, and we're still in Schitt's Creek. I mean, sorry for my language, but
Well, you're right.
we're still, and the governor screwed us with his agreement of allowing Boeing to continue to pollute. And
Yes, it's terrible.
it's terrible. And we're doing a lawsuit against Newsom, and then we're doing a lawsuit against DTSC and Boeing. And this
Well, you should put your links in the chat so that people can get in touch with you, and because this is terrible. Santa Susana was one of the first major nuclear accidents in the world. It is just north of Los Angeles. Terrible pollution, and Boeing was responsible. And they've been in denial for all these years and haven't cleaned it up. And people are suffering. And thank you for your great work. But Santa Susana really needs to be cleaned up, if you can even clean it up. And they need to stop lying about it. It is a very, very dangerous, deadly radioactive site. And thank you again for working on that. This is my article today at progressive.org about the nukes in Germany versus the nukes in California. And Germany has put us to shame. Germany is the 4th largest economy in the world, by the way, the biggest in Europe. This isn't a bunch of hippies out there. This is Angela Merkel is who made the decision finally to shut them as a quantum chemist. So and we're talking about billions of dollars invested in switching over to a solar token economy, and that with some of that money has to go to Santa Susana to clean it up. I see another hand. Thank you so much for that. Please put your contacts in the chat. We are very aware of Santa Susana. It's a horrible nightmare.
I have to tell you something regular because I can't do chat.
Okay, go ahead. Give us your website or your contacts.
You could go to Committee to Bridge the Gap. You could go to Physicians Social Responsibility of LA. And you could go to Parents versus SSFL, which is Santa Susana Field Lab.
Thank you so much. And it's a great
can you repeat that last one more time, please?
Parents versus SSFL.
Okay, kind of broke up, but maybe somebody else. Parents versus SS. Thank you. Wendy got it. Okay, do I take a turn? I've got my hand up.
Please.
Lynn? I just came from the meeting of the Progressive Democrats of Santa Monica Mountains, and Ben Allen was there. State Senator Ben Allen was there of California, and Mila was there, asking him over and over, why did he vote with Newsom? That was quite a discussion. Jan's phone is making noise.
what we need is state reps and state senators like Ben Allen to put
Yeah.
together a committee to inspect Diablo Canyon.
Okay, let
They
me,
have
let,
to
I,
inspect-
let me, I'm sorry, I just was distracted by the noise, but there's more to that story. What I raised my hand and I said, look, if the he said that the governor was strong arming the legislature, like, if you vote against me this time, none of your bills in the future will ever get signed on my desk. I was kind of like that. It was a very ugly discussion, ugly story. And I said, wait a minute, there's more of us than there are of him. If we activists get together and rally, rise up, communicate with one another and organize and mobilize, we put pressure and the governor will change his mind, right? And then Mila spoke up and said, not necessarily, because she pointed out something I did not know. Among the progressive Democrats, there is a breach. There are two schools of thought. My thing is registering voters and targeting young people like the Gen Z. You know, I want to recruit them in and get them to vote with us and empower us. But Amila pointed out that that group is very pro nuclear energy. They think that the new technology is clean, and so that leaves me with my question: how can we educate and convince the younger generation how very bad nuclear energy is? And I do have one thing. I have one idea, and what do you think about my one idea? I listened to Ralph Nader interviewing a guy named Joshua Frank, who wrote a book called Atomic Days: The Untold Story of the Most Toxic Place in America, the Hanford Nuclear Reservation in Washington State. And when I listened to that conversation, I was totally convinced that nuclear has got to go yesterday. So how can we get the younger generation to vote with us and agree that nuclear is bad?
Well, because we have to make it clear that there is no nuclear issue. The issue is not nuclear power in the abstract. The issue is the 94 old reactors that are falling apart and are incredibly dangerous, and then the new ones that are 6, 7, 10 years away. We're in the middle of a giant gap here. They just finished the last 2 big reactors, which opened in Georgia. They were supposed to open 7 years ago. They were supposed to cost $14 billion. They opened. They're opening this year, and they cost $34 billion. There is no future in nuclear power. There are 0 big nuclear power plants being built in the United States, and the average age of the ones that are continue operated is 40 years old. They are incredibly dangerous. Nobody's driving a 40-year-old car, and so that technology has run its course. The new reactors are already more expensive than solar and wind. If you look at the charts of solar, wind, battery, and efficiency technologies, they are going straight up in terms of efficiency and cost effectiveness, straight down in terms of how long it takes to open them and how safe they are. There's just no comparison. If we didn't have alternatives, that would be one thing. But you look at California, you have 1,500 people working at Diablo Canyon and 70,000 working in solar. I mean, what's the deal? It's not even close. So solar and wind create jobs. They're safe, they're clean, they're effective, they're proven. This is not hippy dippy technology anymore. You got $1 trillion worldwide already invested in solar. This is the future, and it's the present, as a matter of fact. And so all you got to really do to convince young people that nuclear is bad is show them the renewables. Solartopia, that's where we need to go. There's actually a video with Pete Seeger singing the Solartopia song at YouTube. You can refer them to that. and just show them a few of the numbers. But there are no big new nuclear plants going to be built in this country, and the small ones are perfectly safe because they don't exist, and they will not exist because they can't compete in any way, shape, or form in terms of job creation or cost.
So thank you, Harvey. That was wonderful. And we're going to have to move on, but I'm going to have Wendy put the connection for your Monday afternoon meeting. And maybe some people on this call want to start attending your Monday afternoon.
We'd love to have everybody. Nancy's our resident therapist, and Wendy is our go-to engineer. Please join us Mondays 2 to 4 p.m. California time, 5 to 7 Eastern time. We talk this week. This week we're going to talk about the indigenous roots of Earth Day and so much more. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And
Thank
no
you,
news,
Harvey.
everybody.
Thanks,
We'll see you
Harvey.
in
Appreciate
Philadelphia.
it. Yeah. Have a great day. Happy Earth
Great
Day.
meeting. I've
Take care.
been to them.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful.
Say something? Could I just? say
No
something?
nukes.
Yeah,
I think
no.
Dory has a quick,
Oh, just,
very quick thing.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, could you hear me?
Go.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. There's a recent documentary about Rocketdyne, or the Santa Susana Field Lab site. And at this moment, it went out of my head, but you could go to PSR-LA.com, Physician Social Responsibility. You could go to Parents versus SSFL to get the name. It's a well done documentary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dory. Thank you, Harvey.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.
Thanks for having me. No nukes.
Okay.
No nukes.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, I was able to move the slide before, but unfortunately, I'm not sure what happened, but let me see if I can.
So at the end of Khin's talk, we'll take questions for her and me.
Yeah, thank you. All right. I'm just gonna get out of here real quickly. Okay, just want to make sure that I've unmuted myself. And oh, hi, Steve. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you joining us. Steve is one of our delegates, one of our elected delegates to the California Democratic Party from AD, is it 54 now? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Steve.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, Steve Dunwoody, just wanted to stop by and in the celebration of Earth Day. And I see so many familiar faces here on the call. Shout out to Khin and Marcia Hanscom and so many others. So just want to say happy Earth Day to everyone, and let's continue to fight.
All right. Okay. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Delegate. Okay, we're gonna go back to screen sharing and hopefully we can advance the slides now. Okay. Okay. My name is Khin and I'm chair of the Environment Committee of SCADA, Southern California chapter of ADA, and welcome everybody. As in LA County, the 5 supervisors that make up the Board of Supervisors just passed an oil ordinance for the county back in April of this year, back in February of this year, where oil production facilities that are currently in production become non-conforming as of February of this year. However, this does not apply to underground gas storage projects. So this is a huge drawback for places like Aliso Canyon and Ballona Wetlands. And they will continue their tradition of responding to any complaints or comments within 24 hours. Okay, as far as site maintenance is concerned, we've had to wait months or even years to have restoration of the site. But according to the new ordinance, the site maintenance has to happen within 90 days after abandonment of any wells. And the well site should be restored to its original profile. And this is a new feature because in the old oil ordinance, the bonds, the indemnity bonds was just $1 million for the entire field, which is woefully inadequate. So we now have a new provision that allows the amount of the bond to be not less than $152,000 per well. And we have so many, we have at least 20 wells that are active at any particular point in time. So this will bring it up to an assurity bond that will cover any damage to our pre-existing grounds according to current prices. And this, the price of the bond can be modified every 5 years to ensure that the amount is sufficient for the current price and inflation and everything wrapped together. And as I was saying before, the well site should be restored so that the site is free of oil, rotary mud, soaked earth, asphalt, etc., within 60 days following plugging and abandonment of the last oil well. This is an improvement on the old oil ordinance because previously they could wait up to 6 months before they remediate their pre-existing ground. So this is a huge improvement. Schedule and compliance. Well, we know that the existing oil wells and production facilities have to come up to current regulations as of February of this year, which is an improvement. And the complaint log should be up to date within 1 year from February of this year. And the bonds should be updated 2 years from this year, which will bring it up to February of 2025. Prior fracking bans. So how does our oil ordinance compare to prior fracking bans? Let's compare it to the fracking bans of 2014. That year, 67% of the people of Mendocino County passed a measure, a ballot initiative called Measure S, which bans fracking. Also in the same year, San Benito County residents passed a fracking ban with 50% of the votes. The Mendocino County fracking ban had teeth so that if you were to violate the ordinance, you could get a year in county jail or $10,000 in fine for each violation of the fracking ordinance. So talk about teeth. This puppy has one. So we want something that protects us to the max, like the Mendocino County ban. So that's an honest to goodness Old Testament kind of, fracking ban. So we need fracking bans like this, not just fracking bans on paper without any enforcement. This is honest to goodness enforcement that we need in Los Angeles County. Okay, and this should be looked upon from a global perspective. As you've heard people say, think globally and act locally. That's us. So we need to listen to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or UN panels, IPCC, as we call it in the biz. They tell us that we have to slash 2/3 of carbon pollution by 2035. That's just in a decade. And rich countries like the United States need to end fossil fuel exploration, quit coal, oil, and gas by 2040. And we need to develop carbon-free electricity in the developed world, in the developing world by 2035. So that's just in a decade. And the water scientist who's part of the IPCC panel said, we are not on the right track, but it's not too late. So there's hope for us. And the panel of IPCC Chief Lee said, if current consumption and production patterns continue, the global average of 1.5 degrees centigrade will be seen sometime in the next decade. So what are we supposed to do? We need to be cognizant of the fact that carbon dioxide emissions from industrialization stay in the air for more than a century. So we need to cut that out right now, right away. Because residents of climate vulnerable nations are up to 15 times more likely to die in floods, droughts, and storms. And residents of poor countries need a 3 to 6 time increase in financial assistance to adapt to a warmer climate that we created in the past century. In any event, let's cut to the chase. The IPCC report came out a week after the Biden administration approved the Willow oil drilling project in Alaska, which could produce up to 180,000 barrels of oil per day. So that's Biden and his administration going up against their own professed climate action plan. So we need to contact POTUS at this address, www.whitehouse.gov, to rescind the permit that they gave to the oil drilling project. Secondly, as we said before, we think globally and act locally. So what can we do locally? Well, if we're driving SUVs, minivans, Hummers, we need to switch to electric cars, of course. And thirdly, today is Earth Day. So all the public transportation is free today. So if you're thinking of driving to the grocery store, consider walking, biking, or taking public transportation because it's free. The subway is free today. So please consider acting locally and at a personal level. So thank you so much. And thank you for your attention. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to entertain them. Thank you so much. Oh, Cliff. Oh, yes. Our president, Cliff, has a call to action for us. Please go ahead, Cliff.
Okay, I think from view, I think we're still sharing your screen at this point.
Let me get out of stop sharing then. Okay, let me click on that and get out of it. Okay.
Okay. So hi, I am Cliff Tasner, and I am the president of Americans for Democratic Action of Southern California. Khin is the chair of our environmental committee, and we have a healthcare committee. We have a peace committee. We have an endorsement committee. We're very active. And Americans for Democratic Action was founded by Eleanor Roosevelt in 1947 as a sort of countervailing force to some of the right-wing movement that was happening with all the red baiting that was going on. And our chapter in California is a pretty feisty one. And if you're not a member, I encourage those of you who are on this call to join. Go to ADA SoCal, and you can donate. We try to get $55 for a yearly membership. If you have an income issue, I think it's $25. We'll take whatever you got, because that money we're going to use to support progressive candidates and support progressive agenda items. And we're a multi-issue organization trying to do some good. And as you can see, look at the people on our board who spoke today: Marcia and Khin and Nancy, and then we also had some other friends speak, Loraine and Harvey. But there's some really great activists doing some really great work, and I hope that you can become part of the work that we're doing and get involved. We meet the first Tuesday of each month, and you can go online, and we'll let you know when our next meeting is, and you can become part of the discussion and become part of this. Thanks so much, Khin, for giving me a minute to say a word.
Thanks, Cliff. And I just wanted to mention that, this is one of our fundraising efforts. So if you could go to adasocal.org and donate $25 towards today's talk, that would be really helpful. And as Cliff said, our membership is $55 a year, but that can be modified to suit your financial profile at the time. So Nancy, please go ahead.
My question for you is, how effective have other states been in banning fracking, or are they even making an effort? And I have a second question that I'd like to direct to my sister Barbara in Alaska, because I'd like to know what the Alaskans think about what you said, how Biden okayed this, went backwards on the drilling permission in Alaska. So Khin, first of all, other states?
Well, I know that they've made efforts in, the state of Pennsylvania to stop fracking, because that's where the movement originally started. I don't know that they've been all that successful, but I think California has been more successful than any other state, because the two counties that I mentioned, Mendocino County and San Benito County, were able to pass ballot initiatives stopping fracking. And because the Mendocino County ordinance ballot initiative had teeth in it, the $10,000 fine and a night in county jail for every infraction of that ordinance, nobody sued them. But somebody did try to sue San Benito County, but then they backed off after looking at the public response. So I'm curious to see what your sister up in Alaska, Barbara, has to say. So I cede my soapbox to her. Thank you, Barbara.
Oh, unmute. Okay, go on to something else. You know what? Any other questions? Because I have a little film I'd like to show.
And I think Barbara should be unmuted. So if she speaks, we might be able to hear her. Another computer, lip syncing.
Okay, she's gonna go to another computer.
She's unmuted, but it's not working. But go ahead with your video, Nancy.
Let me do this.
Maybe Barbara could use her phone and call in to the meeting and speak.
If it's okay, while you look for that video, I'm just gonna drop a link in the chat for that book, Green Amendments, that I mentioned. It's actually a friend of mine, Maya Van Rossum, that wrote it, and she's from Pennsylvania. And I think everyone would be very inspired, and I can try to link you with her, because they've had some excellent success on the state level with exactly what you're talking about, Khin. You're right on point. It's so sharp, and I really appreciate it. And I'll put that link in the chat, and hopefully we can connect more on that later. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
I came across this video, which is about 5 minutes, and we have plenty of time here. And it kind of goes over everything I said and even more scientific. So I think it's a good thing for everybody.
You may have heard that there are 5 giant garbage patches on Earth. They're swirling with basura. Like bottles, small crates, nets, and many tiny specks of plastic. But while these massive collections of trash in the middle of the open ocean get most of the attention, there is another problem. And that one is largely invisible and has spread to basically every corner of the planet. They're called microplastics, and scientists are still working out what they're—
Go ahead and click on share screen,
They
Nancy.
say marine debris is one of the most concerning and—
Sorry. Hold on. I didn't know you couldn't see it. I don't have a share screen.
Down at the bottom, did you press the share screen button at the bottom of your screen?
I lost my share screen.
If you want to put the link in the
There
chat.
it is. There it is. I got it. I got it. I got it. That's something else. You are screen sharing. There we go.
You may have heard that there are 5 giant garbage
Okay,
patches
girl.
on Earth. They're swirling with basura. Like bottles, small crates, nets, and many tiny specks of plastic. But while these massive collections of trash in the middle of the open ocean get most of the attention, there is another problem. And that one is largely invisible and has spread to basically every corner of the planet. They're called microplastics, and scientists are still working out what their repercussions might be. But they say marine debris is one of the most concerning environmental problems we've got. I'll explain. Let's go back to the garbage patches. There are 5 of them scattered across the world, in very specific locations. Like this one here in the Indian Ocean, or over here in the North Atlantic. The most famous is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It covers an area of 1.6 million square kilometers between Hawaii and California. That's roughly 3 times the size of France or twice the size of Texas. But unlike Texas or France, you can't see a garbage patch from space. That's because
it does accumulate in the areas, but it's just not the island of trash we've heard about.
That's Nancy, the director of NOAA's Marine Debris Program. I called her up to learn more about how garbage patches form and how marine debris affects our planet. The patches are more like a really thin soup.
You could be sailing through this area on a boat and not even know you're in it.
That invisibility is why trash in the ocean is such a big issue. Scientists say the smaller the plastic gets, the more of a widespread problem it becomes. There are several reasons for that. Size matters. The big stuff like plastic bottles, crates, and fishing nets that are bobbing around in the garbage patches are relatively easy to spot and scoop out of the ocean. But the smaller a piece of plastic is, the harder it is to find and collect. And they can't be easily caught with trawls, like the ones you may have heard about recently sweeping through the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. What begins as one item of plastic trash can turn into many microplastic pieces. Larger items can get broken down by the wind, sunlight, and even the ocean's vibrant life forms. Some of these microplastics are as small as a grain of rice or a strand of hair. Environmental scientists say they found microplastics in even the most remote places on the planet.
It's in Arctic ice, it's on the seafloor, it's on our beaches, it's really everywhere we look. It is ubiquitous.
Even though scientists know that microplastics are virtually everywhere, they don't know exactly where they're the most concentrated.
If we don't know where the plastic is, we also don't know where the harm that plastic is doing.
Eric is an oceanographer at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. I called him up to learn more about where the plastic might be found. His lab builds machine learning models of how trash moves across the oceans. One of the reasons that environmental scientists focus on garbage patches is that they're the most visible sliver of the ocean's trash universe. But
So if you think about the harm that the plastic can potentially have on marine life, then it's not so much about how many kilos of plastic there are, it's about how many items of plastic there are. There are many more organisms that can eat a tiny piece of plastic than organisms that can swallow an entire plastic bag or so.
Eric told me that the hope is that the models his lab is building will help scientists develop better cleanup plans to target the most vulnerable ecosystems.
Oh.
You may have heard that there are 5 giant garbage patches on Earth.
Sorry.
You may have heard. Trash moves across the oceans. One of the reasons that environmental scientists focus on garbage patches is that they're the most visible sliver of the ocean's trash universe. But
So if you think about the harm that the plastic can potentially have on marine life, then it's not so much about how many kilos of plastic there are, it's about how many items of plastic there are. There are many more organisms that can eat a tiny piece of plastic than organisms that can swallow an entire plastic bag or so.
Eric told me that the hope is that the models his lab is building will help scientists develop better cleanup plans to target the most vulnerable ecosystems. Another problem, because they're so hard to clean up, the microplastics that do end up in the ocean could stick around for decades, if not longer, potentially causing long-term harm. We started using plastics in the 1950s, so we don't yet know how long plastics take to completely degrade.
So then what happens to that tiny piece of plastic is it could be ingested by a fish, it could be ingested by a bird as it's flying by, or it could just continue to stay there.
The direct long-term effects of microplastics on more complex animals like birds and humans are still being worked out.
According to researchers, studying how tiny specks of plastic may affect human cells has been difficult. Scientists have found turtles with dozens of microplastics in their guts, which they say may potentially affect their survival because the animals end up eating plastic rather than real food. Some data suggest that microplastics can shorten the lifespans of marine microorganisms like zooplankton. They can also affect how well they reproduce. These effects could have outsized repercussions because these tiny creatures make up the basis of the food chain. That can even impact us. Microplastics can move from one part of our planet to others. It's all connected. By some estimates, people may ingest hundreds of microplastics daily through the air we breathe and the salt and water we consume.
But if you really look into where the highest concentration of plastic is, it's close to coastlines. It's much closer to where people live and where the rivers actually put the plastic into the ocean. It's super local, and we now know of many, many hotspots around cities where plastic concentrations are hundreds of times larger than in the open ocean garbage patch.
The fact that the highest concentrations of plastic are closer to the coastlines may be depressing, but it also means we can do something about the more than 8 million metric tons that end up in the ocean each year. According to the researchers who came up with that estimate, that's the equivalent of finding 5 grocery bags full of plastic on every foot of coastline in the 192 countries they studied.
By far, the best thing that you can do is actually start cleaning up beaches.
Eric says that it's on beaches that much of the plastic tends to go from big to micro, through rubbing on the sand and rocks. Eric and Nancy also told me that limiting the amount of disposable items we use and disposing of them correctly could also help protect our oceans and all the creatures that live in them. If you want to catch more videos like this, please don't forget to hit subscribe. And for more of our environmental coverage, I've left some links down below. Espero verlos pronto.
Hello, everybody. Barb, do you have a microphone? Whoops. Well, chime in when you can, because I'd love an answer. Any questions or comments?
We're doomed.
We're doomed.
Oh, no.
You know, I'm bothered that those people were cleaning up the beach and throwing everything in a big plastic bag.
Can I share something I learned at the other meeting this morning?
Please.
Plastics came up as a, and recycling came up as a topic of concern. And I learned that it's best to just focus on the plastic items that have a 1 or a 2 on them. The others are really actually kind of like polluting the blue bin, the blue recycling bin. They should, other numbers are, except number 5, other numbers should be.
Right.
Yeah, and 5 is kind of questionable too. But glass, don't throw the glass with the plastic. It's polluting too. So the other one, paper. Don't put paper in the recycling bin with the plastic items because it gets mold, it gets damaged, and then it can't be recycled. And the plastic bags that are so thin that go into the recycling with the paper, the machine gets confused and thinks that the plastic is paper and it starts recycling. So I guess the takeaway for me was make sure when I use my blue recycling bin to just put 1s and 2s in it and nothing else, or better yet, just quit using plastic altogether because we are doomed.
That's true. Yeah, 1, 2s, and 5s are supposed to be recycled. I put a lot of effort into touring. I wanted to tour the Santa Monica recycling facility, and
yes.
Guess what? He basically told me forget it. They were closing down, they were losing funding, and I've read other places that were just shipping all of our recycle to China anyway.
And then it gets made into polyester clothing that you'd already mentioned before at another meeting.
Yes.
That's
And
really bad.
In fact, washing polyester clothes puts nanoplastics into the water, into our water system, because nanoplastics come out. Yeah.
We drink it and then it gets into us and our kids. But can I say that the tour of the recycling facility that came up also in the earlier conversation at the other meeting, and Ben went to one and he said it's very informative. The more people that tour those places, the more well educated we will be on this issue and how to deal with it. So I don't know which one were you talking about?
Thank you for that. I'll try again. It was probably a couple of years ago I tried, and I had to give up. The Santa Monica one down on Cloverfield.
It's on Cloverfield, yeah. It's no longer in existence, so it's closed down a year or two ago. But anyway, Wendy has a question. So can you go ahead, Wendy?
Thank you. Yeah. So there's some great points you brought up, especially even the little laundry pod things that are supposed to be eco-friendly. They break down into microplastics. And I read recently that, or I think I did, don't quote me, but I believe that they were finding microplastics in fetuses.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could comment on that, and then also just the endocrine disruption of it, because even like for me, I have a zero water filter, so it's a pitcher that I use to fill that I get my drinking water, but then I immediately put it into glass, because when you hold anything like your food and you store it in plastic, it leaches the chemicals and it disrupts your hormones, which I mean wreaks all kinds of havoc on the body. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
You're
Thanks for the
exactly right.
wonderful.
Well, the basic science, from what the comment you made about it being in infants, it was found that there are these micro plastics in the stools, in the poop of the infants, and in adults too, but more in the infants, and also in the placentas of the babies after birth. So we're certainly feeding nanoplastics and microplastics into the babies. And yes, I think a lot of the plastics leach plastic as long as the water or whatever it is stays in the plastic. And you know, it's a habit, and I got used to trying to remember to carry around my it's not plastic, it's a glass straw. I love it. And the laundry strips are just wonderful. They're so easy. You just take half a strip and throw it in the laundry, and it takes up no room whatsoever. See, it's even invisible. Anyway, what time is it? We got 10 more minutes. Anybody want to pontificate? Come on, we got a smart crowd.
And I just want to remind everybody, and we could segue with this, whatever, or I'm not to direct, but just remember that the plastics come from the fossil fuel industry. I mean, that's what we're all here about, and this is just another arm of that. And I want to quick, before I forget, I want to ask everyone if you want to put the links, any links that have been shared tonight, your wonderful video that you just presented, Nancy, any links that anyone wants, put in the chat. We can all save the chat. I'll save it, but I'll attach those links to the YouTube video that is streaming right now, and I'll repost the link to that in the chat right now. So anything that anybody wants attached, just let me know, and I'll put my email in the chat too if there's anything to get a hold.
I have some trouble figuring out how to find the link.
And you can email it to me too, Nancy.
I'll email it to you.
Sure.
Yeah, Paul.
Well, I do know that there's some efforts in Santa Monica. For instance, I know that when I when I pick my bananas from Trader Joe's and put them in their biodegradable bags, they have these plastic bags that are made out of cornstarch or something like that, and that they biodegrade within a few weeks. which is a good start, but you're right, it's fossil fuels. And we have to merge out of it. And there's, you have to talk 50 states out of that, I hear people complain about the plastic straw. I mean, we now use, in Santa Monica, they made a law saying that you have to use paper straws, which is good because they biodegrade. But I'll go to some places and they still have plastic straws. And I think that a lot of this isn't being enforced. So, I mean, capitalism is really powerful. We need regulated capitalism, and that's the bottom line. And go ahead.
Oh, thanks. No, I think you bring up a great point, because I always say, invest in the things that the change you want to see. I've bought, say, if everybody invested $50 in hemp penny stocks, there were, and like millions, there you go. Paul's shirt, he's saying is hemp. There's hemp, there's mycelium, there's all kinds of new research and development and technologies that are just waiting to be discovered with the right investment. So if people think and really got together, voted with our dollars and shifted the markets and shifted the demand, I think we could have a revolution from the inside out. But hemp can save the world. So I'm gonna say that. Thanks.
Barb in Alaska put in the chat that the wild Alaskan salmon return to their streams after 4 years at sea, and 70% of the sockeyes have microplastics in their body. And I eat salmon all the time.
Cliff has a question.
Well, more a comment, but also, Nancy, I do want to add that you eat plastic, but you already have plastic in you. So the salmon is it's not like the salmon has more plastic in it than you do. I mean, already. So, but I do want to say that when Cree mentioned the idea of hemp, and I'm a big fan of using hemp to make there's all kinds of things we could be doing. If we stopped making plastics out of fossil fuels, we would see a situation where there wouldn't be so much of a push by the fossil fuel companies to make plastics. But there may be a role for plastics in our future, but we could be making them out of seagrass. We could be planting huge amounts of seagrass up and down the coast, which would start to decarbonize and deacidify the oceans, because the ocean's been a huge sink for all of the carbon. And so if we were to start aggressively planting seagrass, not only would we encourage more sea aquaculture, more fish would be alive, more breeding grounds for all kinds of species, and there'd be more diversity, but we could theoretically then harvest that rather than taking stored fossil fuels, stored carbon out of the ground. We could be taking fossil carbon out of the ocean, using it. And possibly, at least it would be zero, we would be a zero net kind of thing. We could theoretically make plastics out of that. And since we're really not recycling any of this stuff, the truth is it's mostly not getting recycled. We need to think about, when we start really doing a good job of getting carbon out of our world, we might want to use bacteria to break that stuff down. And we could create fuel out of it that would be burned on the spot. And the point is, it just at least wouldn't be taking more carbon out of the oceans. So there is a role for plastics. It's surgical equipment. There's a lot of things in our planet that we kind of do need plastics for, but we shouldn't be making them out of fossil fuels. We shouldn't be letting these fossil fuel companies continue to drill for oil. And if we were making them out of hemp, if we were making it out of seagrass, at least it's not creating more carbon. It's just taking carbon we already have and repurposing it a little bit. So that's my thought.
I know that back when there was that big oil break in the Caribbean Sea affecting the coast, someone came up with some kind of organism that you could pour on that, and they ate the fuel. But Wendy, you live down there, you might know more about it, but I'm not aware, I can't conceive of an organism that actually eats plastic. That in itself, I have difficulty with. I'm not so sure that's ever going to happen. It would mean that they have to metabolize it. And I don't think organic organisms have a way to do that at all.
I have heard something about some sort of bacteria that was developed and things that break down. Just off the top of my head, I don't want to give poor information. But again, it's our incentives, you know, like the research and development just isn't there for these things. And a lot of times they get like squished out. And there's also been just different kinds of technologies where they've been able to kind of capture and filter so that the wildlife doesn't get interfered with. But yeah, with the Gulf of Mexico, there was millions and millions of hundreds of millions of gallons of oil in the water. And just the fact that the corporations can get away with this and then be in charge of cleaning these things up, like in Ohio and in Gulf of Mexico, it just shows that, you know, really we're run by corporations and our checks and balances is not in place. And that's a fundamental paradigm shift that needs to happen, where the people need to take back our democracy. I see Paul's got a hand up there.
Yes, what I was going to say, two things. The first thing is mushrooms they've discovered can eat just about anything, consume it. And they're even using it for people, you know, if you want to get buried, they bury you with mushrooms and you get devoured and then you're recycled into the planet. So they've discovered that there's a documentary on Netflix about mushrooms, and they talk about how they're able to do that with plastic and all kinds of items. And plastic is organic. It comes from the ancient organic period, you know, it came from that, you know, coal and all that were really just fossilized plant matter that under great pressure and turned into coal. They're hydrocarbons, just as we are made up of hydrocarbons. So it is possible to do that. And that's something to consider. And there are technologies that can deal with the plastic, but for some reason, I guess the ignorance is just overwhelming in this country. And willful ignorance in some cases too. And some of it has to do with the dollar, you know.
And convenience.
Right.
Just don't want to put themselves out a little bit.
So anyway, I mean, you know, taxes are, according to Roosevelt, FDR, taxes are dues for which we pay for civilization. And if I misquote that, please correct me.
Well, I want to thank everyone on this call, especially Khin for all her effort at making sure this happened again this year and organizing us, and Wendy for her expertise. Oh my God, you've done a wonderful job, Wendy. And thank you all for participating, contributing, and let's do this again next year, and hopefully we'll have success to announce. Marcia, go ahead.
I just want to say Wendy put the link in the chat several times for how to access this program that was streamed on YouTube. And I think we should all work to share it out for people who weren't able to attend, for people who came a little late, so we can see, you know, everybody's presentation, and so we can get more support in for Americans for Democratic Action.
Cliff, did you have something to say? Or
I just wanted to add to that, folks. Paul, we should send out an email blast with the link so that those people who missed this, because other people are doing other Earth Day events. I know that the Progressive Democrats of Santa Monica Mountains was busy doing an event. So let's send out a big email blast.
Well, I will need the chats. What'll happen is after we get off, there'll be a safe chat. I don't know who's we're using, if we're using Khin's or Wendy, or we're using yours. Oh, cool. So you know my email address, thepaulman@gmail. Perfect. Then all you got to do is just send me the chat and I'll get those links.
And everybody can actually save the chat. If you don't know how, you just open up the chat, and then next to the little reactions at the very, very bottom, the little icons, you'll see a smiley face, and right to the right of the smiley face are 3 little dots, and you click on those dots and it'll tell you can save chat, and you just tell it where you want to save the chat so it doesn't get lost, or you can search your computer. But I will send it to Paul, and I'll send it to Nancy, so that way everyone has it. You got it. And I wanted to thank Nancy so much for the kind words. I really appreciate that. Such an amazing presentation from everybody. I'm so honored to be a part of this. I'm glad. I enjoyed it very much. And I actually like to, in the future, invite the presenters that were on today, Marcia, Loraine, Khin, Nancy, and maybe little condensed versions, but on Harvey's show, like you said, I'm a co-convener. So I would love to continue this and we can redo this and get the message out to our audience. Paul is a great friend of the show and I put the link in the chat as well. So we can keep this conversation going because it's just so important. You all did such an amazing, amazing job of sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. So thank you for having me be a part of it.
Lynn, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a question about the Tuesday meeting time. It said 7 p.m., but is that New York time or LA time?
Oh,
or
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's Pacific daylight time at this point. So we're in New York.
I'm in LA, so that's good.
All right. Yes, we're in Southern California chapter. When the ADA National meets, we meet their time, but here we meet our time.
Okay.
But before we adjourn, I just wanted to thank Marcia Hanscom because you and I were at the West LA College's new establishment of the California Center for Climate Change Studies program at West LA College this morning, which was from 9 to 1. And, we've continued our activism through the afternoon. So it's been a long day for us, but, hey, a woman's job is never done. So I thank Marcia for spending her entire day with us. So thanks again, Marcia, and the rest of the speakers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Khin and Nancy, both for putting this on.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Okay. Happy